I've had this thought ringing in my head ever since I first read the books and thereafter watched the Eated Rivalry show. Because, as I'm sure you all probably already know, I do have a corner of my brain dedicated to thinking incessantly about the characters of Shane Hollander and Ilya Rosanov. Why? Because I find them fascinating and multi layered as hell. But also, because as someone who was considered gifted as a kid and had to navigate my school life with that label, there's a core part of their characterization that has always resonated with me. Not their physical prowess and their skill in the sport that they play. As you all can probably tell, that really isn't my forte. Nope, it's more the exploration of how isolating being considered exceptional can be and the burden that comes along with those expectations, especially when all of this revolves around a team sport as we see with Ilia and Shane. Of course, before I dive deeper into all of that, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lena, Sherry, Holly, and Kat for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, back to Ilya and Shane. I do think the isolation of being the best and the burden that comes with it is more overt when it comes to Ilya because, in his case, a support system that should have been present to help him navigate everything that comes with playing at his level and being present to also ground him isn't available to him. The minute his mother passed and he was placed solely in the care of Gregory Rosanov, it was set for him that he wouldn't be able to rely on his family for any sort of support. Matter of fact, the show makes it quite clear that neither Gregory nor Alexei ever made the effort or tried to be supportive or present for Ilya from the moment he started to play professionally. Alexei only saw him as a walking ATM with a complete disregard for anything else except for the money that Ilya is able to funnel his way. This is made even more obvious when Ilya is panicking about their father's incessant need to reach him, and Alexei instead cracks a joke about the call, probably being because Ilya sucked and lost the game. It's a very distinct line, one that is later echoed by Gregory, both when Ilya team loses at the Prospect Cup and also when the loss to Lavia happened at the Olympics. It's never seen as the team losing. The focus, the narrative that his family clings to and extols is that Elia lost because to them, what's the use of all that skill if you cannot bring victory home? I always consider it such a vast difference from how Yuna and David have created a support system for Shane, where it is clear that they both actively are involved in being present for him, in rooting for him and his success, whilst at the same time not burdening him with the expectations that the onus is on him and solely on him to cinch a win. I like to think back to when he got hit and was recovering at home, and all Yuna and David did was just care for him. This might seem like the expected behavior one should expect from one's parents, and your knee jerk reaction might be to think that I'm making a big deal out of it. But I want you to consider for a moment if it had been Ilya who had been hit and whose injury automatically spelled the end of his team's chances at the playoff that year. And imagine if Gregory was still alive at that point. What do you think his reaction would be? Supportive? Ha! We both know that he would have found a way to blame Ilya for not being all seeing, all powerful, and all knowing enough to have avoided getting hit. We get no mention of Grigory Rozanov ever having been a hockey player, so I'm going with the supposition that he wasn't. Hell, I will take it a step further, especially because of the way he talks to his son. I will assume that he's one of those people who never caught it. He was never given the chance or opportunity to play in the juniors, to play in the sports because he didn't have a smidgen of talent. And so I think it's rage and partly jealousy that drives a lot of his interactions with Ilya when it comes to them engaging on matters that pertains to Ilya playing hockey. That is my own bit of headcanon. And of course, it doesn't help matters either that is a high ranking cop who is probably upset that his seemingly undisciplined son keeps rising within the game, even though it is clear to Gregory that Ilia isn't applying himself. Gregory's thoughts, mind you, not mine. And yet is able to be way successful at what he does. He wants to be able to make some sort of stamp that Ilia's success is tied to Gregory. And he believes that demeaning his son is the only way he can control him, which is further isolating for Elia. It's once again a great contrast to someone like Yuna, who is also invested in Shane's success as a hockey player, but who instead channels that investment in creating the environment that she believes Shane needs to thrive, whilst also being a representation for other minorities who would look up to him within the game. And I know someone is about to say, well, if we can ascertain that a large part of Ilya's isolation comes from the abuse that his father inundated him with since he was a child, and it is clear that Yuna is nothing like Gregory, then where does Shane's own isolation and the burden he bears come from, Noria? And to that, I will say, just like with Ilya, it comes from being the best. I said it before on this channel, but it's such a great piece of narrative storytelling that has Shane and Ilya's first meet be with Shane leaving the rest of his team to go meet Ilia, who had also separated from the rest of his team, and they get to have their own introduction. And yes, that conversation ends with both of them promising to walk away after their meeting together with a win, which is fitting because their competitiveness has always driven them to bring out their own inner brilliance, since the only person that can challenge them is the other person. And yes, it doesn't take away from the fact that you have these two generational talents separated from others, meeting each other like two lonely islands, colliding with the other. And from there, their connection is born. But it also doesn't take away from the fact that their exceptionalism isolates them. And we see this reflected in the team dynamics. For the Metros slash Voyagers, they built the entire team around Shane. He gets to carry the burden of being the linchpin around their success. And whilst that says a lot about how incredible of a player Shane Hollander is, it doesn't take away from the fact that even within the team, the onus is going to always be on him to bring 1,000, 1,000,000% on board, because that has become the expected, which the same cannot be said for the rest of his team. And the same can be applied to Ilya as well to a large degree. Boston made its renaissance because of the addition of Ilya Rozanov to their roster. By the time he had built his momentum after his rookie season and made his way to captain, he had become the heart, the solid beating part of his team. That level of pressure and expectation, because of just how phenomenal of a player you are, does have an isolating effect. It says a lot that after the tuna melt scene and Shane went public with Rose, Boston and Montreal's first game together was such a disaster. And you even had the commentators bringing up the fact that it felt like neither Ilya nor Shane showed up to the ice. It's such a damn neat statement when you consider the fact that there is a complete disregard for the whole team, the rest of the team. Hell, there are 6 players at the same time on the ice at every point, inclusive of the goalie. And yet the blame, the disappointment is placed on Shane and Ilya, because when you are that good, the expectation is astronomical. And when you fall short of it, the backlash is devastating. Hockey is a team sport. But when you have generational talent on your team around which your team's lineup revolves, then that places such a burden on the individual. Like I said earlier, it's interesting that Shane getting hit by Cliff effectively put an end to the Metros slash Voyagers' dreams of making it to the playoffs that year. The same can be said for Ilya's injured ribs, which meant that the Raiders had to bow out early from the playoff as well. Whilst we can talk about hockey being a team sport, the show and the story itself highlights the burden of being the center force of a team, whereby without you, everything falls apart, and the isolation and resentment in that regard that comes with it when even the players on your team know just how central of a role you can play. I like to think that this is the reason why, and spoilers warning, if you haven't read the long game and don't want to be spoiled for future events, put I would say put me on mute until the spoilers warning leaves your screen. You have been warned. But anyway, as I was saying, I like to think that this is part of the reason why the Voyagers slash Metros are so vile to Shane when the truth comes out about his relationship with Ilya. Like, sure, there's the homophobia where they can't wrap their head around the fact that Shane likes wrapping his lips around Ilya's cock and vice versa. but also because they know that without Shane, their team is nothing, and they resent that he has that level of power over them and their success. And to have the person that they basically deified come out as being partnered with the one player who is just as exceptional as he is, the only player who's been able to keep up with his level of expertise, it made everything worse for them, exacerbated the jealousy, ends the vile. It's also the reason why the Centers would always be the superior team and why they are elevated so much after Ilia's rousing speech to them. Because whereas a lot of the other teams tend to have one central player or maybe two on a good day, except for New York, of course. New York's got quite the team lineup, although it took Scott getting together with Kip for that to really come together. But as I was saying, whereas a lot of the other teams tend to have one or two central players, the centers have good pieces, great players. There's Bood, there's Wyatt, they have Luca and Troy with Ilia leading them. Everybody on that team can pull their weight, except maybe Tanner Dillon. Sorry, Ilia is right about that. But yeah, that is why I'm a fan of the centers. It's a reduced burden when you're not the only exceptional player on your team. And of course, we know that they get even more of a boost when Shane signs on. I really can't wait for us to meet the Sens in season two because they would be such a great contrast to how the system and the team currently operates as we've gotten to see in season one. I like to rewatch certain scenes when I don't have enough time to just do a full rewatch of the show during the weekend. And the first All Stars game that we get to see Ilia and Shane participate in strikes such a good note for me, especially as it pertains to how separated they are from their peers and even those who've been in the game for way longer than they have. We see it established that the record has been held by Scott Hunter for so long, and then in comes Ilia, brazen as always, as he breaks the record with ease and time to spare. And then Shane follows afterwards and immediately breaks Ilia's new record, shaving off almost an entire second. It's such a great way to show that the established era of Scott Hunter is being challenged directly by these two rookies and only these two rookies. Nobody else compares, nobody else even comes close. That their team had these two 18-year-olds be the face of that press conference, had them step on the ice and have a face off in their rookie season when other rookies just would not even be able to dream of such an opportunity. I like to imagine what those other rookies thought. The number three draft pick, for example, who we never got to see again after their draft. Like, how did he feel being left in the dust? How did his team feel knowing that if the stars had aligned for them just right, maybe they would have gotten the chance to snag either Ilya or Shane? How did the third nominee for the Rookie of the Year feel as the years passed by and Shane and Ilya continued to blaze the trail and leave everyone else in the dust? Like, there would be jealousy there, definitely, envy, certainly, resentment, maybe a sprinkle or a full tubload of it. But I just like to sit and think and imagine the decade or the almost decade of their career that we've gotten to see so far and how wide the gap this set was. Another spoiler, but it's something else that I do think contributes to Ilia's depression in the long game. The fact that from his childhood up until that point, his worth had been tied to how good of a player he is and how he's always been able to pull his team through for them to find success. And then he goes to Ottawa, and nothing he's doing is able to bring the Centers out of decades of rot, of obscurity, bad press, the disappointment that had seeped so far into the team that even new players who should be good were buying into it. Like, yes, we know that it doesn't last long, and a couple of years later, Ilya is able to give them the speech that, combined with the almost plane crash, lights a fire under their ass. But for the longest time before that, I think that in addition to having to keep their relationship a secret and dealing with the change, the move, realizing that he's not able to bring the success to the team that has always defined his exceptionalism as a player, most likely exacerbated Ilia's depression to quite a degree after he moved to Ottawa. Shane's isolation doesn't show up quite as visibly as Ilia's does, but I also like to imagine that prior to Ilia showing up and Shane finding himself a rival that challenges him at every turn and with whom he's able to push himself and his skills so that he can come out on top. I like to think that before Ilia showed up, Shane, who was methodical with what he did and how he played and just kept striving to be the best, did feel that clear divide between himself and the other players and just didn't know how to cross it because Shane Hollander is not about to make himself less of a player for others. If they can't keep up, then that is on them. And so when he meets this Russian hockey player who likes to smoke in no smoking zones and is cocky and brash and confident with the skills to back it up, he finds in him a kindred spirit. Of course, it also helps that he's hot as hell and fucks like a god too. Book Shane's words, not mine, mind you. So, yes, he meets someone who gets him, who helps him see, realize that there's more that he, Shane, can bring forth because this person challenges him and he finds himself falling in love. And I do think that that does help him feel not as lonely. The burden is still there because everything is riding on him to bring in the win, but it's not as lonely. It's not as isolating because Ilya is there and that makes quite the difference. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might potentially be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.